Hello, A Push World. This is Coach Hjort, and I'm here to talk about the document-based question today and how it really truly is a document-driven essay. So no matter if you are watching this for my AP US History class or you are a part of my APSI, AP Summer Institute, I hope to give you some guidance on how to approach the document-based question that is on the AP US History exam. So let's begin. So as you see this picture, you are actually looking at William Lloyd Garrison, the liberator, the radical abolitionist that is going to help start the Civil War. So I will have talked about him in my AP US History class, and hopefully as AP Summer Institute, I'll talk about him just a little bit more, but I'm not going to discuss him today. So let's get on to this document-based question. The document-based question is 25% of your AP US History score, so realize that you should spend some time making sure that you know how to answer this. In doing so, hopefully you are going to kill the DBQ. And when you slay the DBQ, it's really going to help set the stage for you to get a 3, 4, 5. This DBQ is only periods 3 through 8, which means it's 1754 to 1980. That is the French and Indian War all the way up to Jimmy Carter. So Ronald Reagan can be used as contextualization, but Ronald Reagan, you will not have a DBQ that should extend past 1980. Can you talk about things that happened after 1980? Yeah, but that's going to be more contextualization rather than the actual theme or the bulk of your document-based question. You still can have a late DBQ. You can have a DBQ that talks about the 1970s and the 1980s possibly. We've had a DBQ in the past that actually was a 6-year DBQ that talked about Richard Nixon. It talked about, tell me about the foreign and domestic policies of Richard Nixon between 1968 and 1974. So you could possibly have that with 7 documents. So just be prepared. The document-based question that was asked in the most recent test, and I'm going to put just a little date on this video, but in the most recent test, which was the 2022 test, the time period was 1800 to 1850. So it could range anywhere between 1754 and 1980. You will have 100 minutes to write both essays, to write the DBQ and the long essay. You want to make sure that you gauge your time wisely. I'll give you some suggestions on what to do and how to gauge that time wisely. But this particular document-based question and long essay, that 100 minutes is pretty tight, being able to finish both. And so I'm going to give you some strategies on maybe how to cut a little corners and how to win, how to actually maybe get a 5 on the DBQ by only doing 2 paragraphs. I think you should write this essay first, but that's just my strategy. It's worth 25% of your score. The long essay is worth 15% of your score. I can do less than greater than, and 25% is greater than 15%. So yeah, you should attack this essay first. But what if you get what I like to call the DBQ from hell? Then you maybe go write your long essay and then come back and see if you can write the DBQ the best that you can, trying to get as many points as you can. The goal score for your DBQ would be a 4, 5, 6. You get a 4, 5, 6, you're going to end up getting a 3, 4, 5. Let me say that one more time. If you get a 4, 5, 6 on the DBQ, you probably will end up getting a 3, 4, 5. It almost solidifies a 3, 4, 5 on the as your overall score, as long as you just don't completely collapse on the short answer section and some of the other sections of the test. Okay. The secret to success on this DBQ is planning. Okay, from this point forward, I'm actually going to shut my video off. And so you're just going to kind of be listening to my PowerPoint. So this can almost turn into a podcast at this point. Just kind of listen to the DBQ and how to actually approach the DBQ. So as we move forward, these are the 7 points that go into the DBQ. There are contextualization and thesis point. You have 1 point for using 3 documents, and we'll talk about that. It's a very low bar. You just got to use the 3 documents. I say that you should use the 3 documents and use the 3 documents to answer the question. You then get a point for using 6 documents to answer the question. I'll talk about how that is. That's a very high bar to get this point. Then you're going to HIP 3 documents. I'll explain what HIPPing means in the future. Those will be the sourcing of documents. You're going to bring in a piece of outside evidence that's going to add value and answer the question. And then finally, you have the analysis skill, which is the complexity skill. And we'll talk about that as we progress. All right, so what does this actually look like when you're just overall ballpark of the DBQ? So your intro paragraph is where your first 2 points come from. Your intro paragraph should have your contextualization and thesis. I think you should start your DBQ with contextualization. I'll explain what contextualization is, but just really quickly, it's about 4 sentences that is going to set the stage for what is this question about. And this all leads to, in other words, this leads to the actual question. So if the time period started in 1800, what happened prior to 1800 that is about the question? And you'll kind of see this kind of structured later on. Then you'll have the thesis, okay? The thesis is 1 point. It should be probably 2 to 3 sentences should be your thesis. And I'll explain what that looks like. So if you can get those 2 points in your first paragraph, then the rest of the DBQ literally writes itself by using the documents to answer the question, HIPPing the documents to answer the question, and bring in a piece of outside evidence that's going to add value. I'm not even going to approach the complexity point until I get to the very end. And if you are able to get that point, awesome. But I'm trying to get you a 3, 4, 5 on the exam, and I think if you can get a 4, 5, 6 on this DBQ and not have analysis, not have the complexity point, you're still okay. Okay. Notice I do have that you must hit 4 documents. I think you should hit 4 documents just in case you're screwing up. Okay. So try to think about HIPPing 4 documents. Conclusion, we'll talk about that later. There's no point for a conclusion unless you're going to use it as your complexity point. So don't write a conclusion just to write a conclusion. Write a conclusion to get a point. We're trying to win here. This is a first draft essay. So you're trying to win and you're trying to get as many points as possible. So when you are writing your introduction, you want to remember that this is 25% of your overall score. This is a first draft essay. And normally this is the first essay that you're going to write. So take your time, plan out your contextualization and thesis. And I'll show you how to plan this DBQ at the end. But contextualization. So if you don't know what contextualization is, you're going to take about 3 sentences to set the stage for the reader. You really want to accurately and explicitly, as it says there, working the essay topic into the larger story of the development of this essay, of this time period. If the essay happens to be about, what are the causes that are leading to the American Revolution? Well, prior to that, so the bulk of the essay is going to be about the cause of the American Revolution, and the documents are going to be about the cause of the American Revolution, probably. But what happened before that is going to help to set the stage so the reader knows that you know what is going on? Well, the French Indian War and the end of solitary neglect happened before that time period. So you're going to talk about 3 or 4 sentences that kind of leads the reader into the time period of the American Revolution. Because if your time period is, let's say for the American Revolution, 1775 to 1800, the causes and effects of the American Revolution, then you're going to, what happened before? Maybe 10 to 20 years before the time period. The big question is, how far back should you go? Once you start getting into the 1800s and the 1900s, or the 19th and 20th century, you probably only want to go back 20, 30 years at the most. Sometimes you could just go back a short period. You can maybe go back 5 or 10 years. Sometimes you might want to venture back 50 years. You really don't want to venture back too far, okay? But you want to venture back enough that's going to give the reader an idea that you are accurately and explicitly working the essay topic, whatever the topic happens to be, into the larger story of the development of that time period. How did we get here? What led us here? Okay, so you're going to do that in about 3 to 4 sentences. Then you're going to have your thesis. Okay, I like to break the thesis. I should do this in bullets. I'm sorry, I didn't do it in bullets. But if you read through this, the first sentence is you want to reword the question. So I literally want you to reword the question, and in doing so, you're going to use the time period, you're going to use the topics, and you're going to use the historical thinking skill. That's what HTS stands for. That HTS could be a comparison essay, it could be a causation essay, or it could be a CCOT, a continuity or change essay, okay? Then your second sentence, you're going to introduce your 2 to 3 groups. I'm hoping that you're going to have two groups, okay? And you're going to give that group a name that is going to be probably a short little phrase that kind of describes the theme of that group. Okay, I'll show that to you in a little bit greater detail in just a moment. And then remember that part of your thesis could be talking about what also happened as far as maybe a alternate viewpoint document or an opposite skill document. In other words, let's say you're doing a causation essay. You can do, hey, this group here is really talking about the causes of the American Revolution, but one of the documents is talking about either an effect of the American Revolution, or it might be a different viewpoint of maybe a loyalist view of why they didn't want the American Revolution to happen. So that shows a different point of view, which is another way that you can achieve complexity. So you can put that into your thesis, but your thesis should probably have 2 to 3 groups or topics that you've grouped the documents together. Then it sort of looks like this. So the first 4 sentences, I literally have this thing down to a science, the correct number of sentences. So the first 4 sentences, your contextualization, that's what we talked about before. And then your 5th sentence is what I like to say is the beginning of your thesis statement. You're going to reword the question using historical thinking skill, using the topic from the question, and using the time period. Then your 6th sentence, and it could be 7 if you'd like, is going to outline 2 to 3 groups, and then name your group with a simple phrase that addresses the theme of your group, okay? By telling the reader which historical thinking skill you are going to use in your body paragraph to answer the question. That's your thesis, okay? You are not going to begin talking about the documents. Can I repeat that one more time? You are not going to begin talking about the documents, breaking down the documents, using the documents, okay? Some of my students actually prefer, and I actually like it. I should put it into my PowerPoint. I haven't worked into my PowerPoint, but when you, in your thesis, when you put your group name, you might put in parentheses that this represents, let's say it's documents 1, 2, 3, 4. You put in parentheses, or I like to go, that's your parentheses. You're going to say, after you get done talking about that particular group name, you're going to say documents 1, 2, 3, 4, discuss it. So it gives a heads up to the reader. Oh, I know that you're going to talk about documents 1, 2, 3, 4 in your second body paragraph. Then you're going to talk about documents 5, 6, 7 in your third body paragraph. I hope that makes sense, but I would like to see that. So it's a little heads up to the reader. Hey, this is the order of the documents that I'm going to discuss. That's why planning is incredibly important. Okay. So that's the first paragraph. That's 2 points. Okay. And it's planning. I'll show you how to plan this whole thing later on, but that's how the first paragraph develops. Then you get the body paragraphs. Okay, the body paragraphs is where you're going to use the document to answer the question, hit the document to answer the question, and bring in a piece of outside evidence and possibly your complexity argument. Okay, to do this, you're going to have this thing called document usage. Okay, students should treat the documents like somebody's gone out and actually researched for them. In researching for them, they've actually decided that, hey, I'm going to use the ideas from these documents in order to answer their essay. Then make sure that you do not quote from the documents. Okay, as a reader, I just skip through them. Okay, I'm reading your essay to see if you've answered the question. I'm not reading the essay to see if you actually just copied the documents. We're not looking for that. To use the documents, you want to summarize what the document's about so the reader knows, oh, this is what the document's about. Then you want to use that information to answer the question in a separate sentence, okay? You can use a separate sentence or 2, but I like to call it the therefore statement, because you're going to start off by saying therefore in whatever document it happens to be. Let's say it's the Declaration of Independence. Therefore, The Declaration of Independence is showing how one of the causes of the American Revolution is this document that addresses the separation. And that really is going to lead to a major cause that led us to separate between the American colonies and Great Britain. Okay, so you use that information to answer the question. So first, one sentence of summary, and that's why you're going to summarize all the documents before as you're planning, and then one sentence of using that information to answer the question. Once you get done, parenthetical, reference that document. So make sure that, because it makes it easier for the reader to count, oh, they've used document 1, oh, they've used document 2, they've used document 3, they've used document 4. They've used actually 4 documents, and they use those 4 documents to answer the question. Okay, so you're on the road for that 2 points for usage, because you get 1 point for using the documents. And notice how I have it written here. Use at least 3 documents to answer the question. That's actually not the bar on the test. The bar on the test is that you just use 3 documents at least somewhat properly. You've attempted to use these 3 documents in your essay. But I want you to use the 3 documents and use the 3 documents to answer the question, at least 2 sentences to do that. Then the high bar point is where you're going to use 6 documents. Now, you're going to have to make that decision on the day of the test. Are you going to use 6 documents? Are you going to try to get that point or not? Okay, that's all about time. Okay, can you actually write that 3rd body paragraph and get that extra point? Okay, maybe you can if you have enough time. But you don't want to leave that long essay just hanging on, hanging out there and not getting answered. You want to make sure that you leave enough time to answer that long essay. So that's the usage point. Then I have an example here as if this happened to be one of our documents. Okay, let's say it's called document 1, and it's the 2nd paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. So what can you do as you're reading through the documents? Maybe underline a few things, and I've kind of underlined and put them in red of some of the things that I'm going to talk about what this document is. And then down at the bottom underneath where it says Thomas Jefferson, this is my summary. The Declaration of Independence lists the natural rights and rationale for separation from Great Britain in 1776. That's what in my planning, I've summarized this document. Then what do I do with that information? I then use that information to, say it with me, answer the question. Okay, that's helping the reader understand that you not only use the document, but you also use the document to answer the question. That's one of the bar that you must achieve in order to get that point. Okay, so you want to do that with at least 6 documents. Okay, document analysis is something that is a difficult thing for a lot of high school students. High school students on the national exam don't do so well on this sourcing document. So I'm going to tell you how I would suggest sourcing the document. I want you to use the words in the source or the sourcing phrase in order to let the reader know that you're trying to source a document. So you've picked 4 documents. Okay, which 4 do you think are the easiest to actually tell using one of these skills? Now, do you have to use all these skills? No. Can you use one of these skills for all 4 documents? Yep. The one I prefer you to use is the historical context, or what the College Board really calls historical situation. It's fine. Okay. So the historical context or historical situation of the document is what's going on right around the time period of that document. So you're going to use that, and you're going to go, oh, for instance, I go back to the Declaration of Independence. The historical context of the Declaration of Independence is it was created in 1776, which is over a year after the American Revolution had begun in April of 1775, and it's a catalyst document that led us to the American Revolution, okay, or at least caused the American Revolution. Now, I must use that information to answer the question. Okay, so you then go back and you use that therefore sentence. Therefore, this document set in 1776 shows that the United States were reluctant revolutionaries. I always love that phrase. Reluctant revolutionaries, because it took them over a year to declare their independence. But when they did, that is going to cause us to lead to the American Revolution. Always use the words from the question in order to answer the question. Okay? Historical context in the past, or historical situation as it's called by the College Board, is the skill that a lot of students do well on the test and actually get a point. You could also use intended audience. You could also use purpose. You could also use point of view. Those are the skills that you could possibly use. I suggest that you do not HIP a data document. Don't do it. Okay, so don't use, if there's a data document or they're talking about the consumer price index or whatever they're talking about, don't use that document to actually HIP. Okay, I stopped there for just a second because I was hoping that I was recording, and I am recording. Okay, it kind of worried me that I had been talking for this long and maybe not recording, but I am. Okay, all right, so moving on. I always like to show in class this particular document, and I have them HIP. I'm not going to do that right now as far as HIPing this document, so I'm going to kind of skip over it, but we'll do that in my APSI, and we'll also do it in class. Outside evidence. Okay, so the outside evidence point. What do you do in order to get the outside evidence? Well, students must bring in a piece of outside evidence that is completely outside the document. Is it good to, can a document spur a piece of outside evidence? For instance, if you see the Declaration of Independence, could you possibly think, oh, well, around the Declaration of Independence was this event called the Boston Tea Party, and let's just pretend that that's not one of the documents. So you might use the Boston Tea Party as one of the causes that led to the American Revolution. See where I'm going with this? Okay, so you pick something that you are going to then use in order to answer the question. But the problem is, if you use something that is spurred, that might have happened right around the time period of the your particular document, if that document spurred something to for you to use, you need to make sure that you separate it completely. In other words, you treat it completely separate from the document, because if you don't, you might just get the HIPing point for it, okay, which is not bad, but I'm saying you want to make sure that you separate it completely. Don't bring any UBIs, don't bring any useless bits of information like, you know, John Tyler's grandson is actually still alive. And so when I actually made this video in 2022, his grandson is actually still alive. So I don't need to know that. Okay, I don't need to know any UBI. Look at this information as it's document A. I think that's a good way to approach this. And it also is a good way to set the reader up saying, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Reader, in parentheses, I'm going to put doc 8, and you're going to realize that there's not 8 documents, there's only 7 documents. So guess what this is? My piece of outside evidence. Okay, so you can possibly do that. Your outside evidence must add value. This actually comes from one of question leader on the DBQ who just retired after 38 years of teaching, but my good friend Joe Bosley always would say that your piece of outside evidence must add value to the question, that you're just not dropping it in. Add value to make sure that you're answering the question. The evidence must be used to help answer the question, as I've said it, and I think I call it the power of 3 sentences. Okay, so your first sentence when you're bringing in a piece of outside evidence is to intro that information and explain it in great detail. Okay, that should take a sentence. So what is almost like you're summarizing your document that you had in using the documents. You're going to summarize what is this piece of outside evidence. Okay, next, begin to work it into the context of the question. Why is this piece of outside evidence somewhat important to this time period, to the context of this question? Then finally, make sure that you use the outside evidence to answer the question. Make sure you also use the historical thinking skill that, hey, this piece of outside evidence caused something to happen, changed something, or it possibly is a similarity or a difference. Okay, so that's how you do outside evidence. Now, I'm going to talk about the power of 4 sentences with 4 documents. Okay, the first thing that I want to point out is every time you start a body paragraph, you're going to have a topic sentence. As soon as you get done with the topic sentence, now the DBQ writes itself. So write your topic sentence. In other words, what group are you about to talk about? Okay, then you go to your first document that you have planned to use. You are then going to, with one sentence, have a summary sentence explaining the document to the reader. That's your explanation. You're then going to have your therefore sentence. Therefore, and then explain how that document's information helps to answer the question using the historical thinking skill. Okay? Then you go to your third sentence. The third sentence is going to be your first HIP skill from that document. Okay? So if you've used document 1, you're now going to HIP document 1. Okay? And then from that HIP document, you're going to use another therefore sentence explaining how you are going to HIP using that skill to answer the question. So you HIP in the third sentence, and then your fourth sentence is going to repeat that, but it's going to use that information to answer the question. Okay? You do this for 4 documents, it's going to get you a usage point and a hipping point. So that's 2 points. If you want the third point, you can use sentence 1 and sentence 2 on the other 3 documents in your third body paragraph. Okay, does that make sense? That third body paragraph would have a topic sentence, and then you would, those 3 documents that you haven't used yet, you're now going to try to use it and use it to answer the question. Use the next document, use it to answer the question, use the third document to use it to answer the question. If you do that all correctly, we're now up to like 3 to 4 points worth of information. Okay. Finally, before I get into the planning stage and stuff like that and how we're really going to approach this, I want to talk about the front loading of the document. Okay, this is an option that I think you should really consider. Front loaded documents means that you or the student should group 4 of the documents, name it, and then use that as your second body paragraph. Okay, because you're going to use the documents to answer questions. HIP the documents to answer the question. And then you're going to bring in a piece about that evidence, hoping to get a 5 with just 2 paragraphs. I'll explain that in just a second. So you name the 2 groups from your thesis because you use 4 documents in 1 paragraph and 3 documents in the other paragraph, or you can use 1 document in the other paragraph. I don't care. But at least 4 of the documents should be stuck into the second body paragraph. Then name it, and that's going to go into your thesis. You are then going to use all 4 documents, okay, independently, and use that document. Let's say use document 1 to answer the question. Then you're going to actually HIP document 1 to answer the question. Then you're going to use document 2 to answer the question. HIP document 2 to answer the question. Use document 3 to answer the question. HIP document 3 to answer the question. And you get the point, okay? Finally, you're going to bring in that 1 piece of outside evidence to help answer the question. And if you do this properly, it should take between 20 and 22 sentences to produce 3 points. You add those 3 points with your other 2 points from the contextualization and thesis, ladies and gentlemen, you're up to a 5. And you've only written 2 paragraphs. Now you're off to the long essay. Go write part of the long essay. Go write the first 2 paragraphs of the long essay, hoping to establish a 3 or a 4. Okay, I don't think you're going to get a 4. But I think you can get 3 points in 2 paragraphs. Okay, you get a 5 or a 6 on the DBQ and you get a 3 on the long essay, you're cooking with gas. You're going to end up with a 4, almost guaranteed. Okay, so that's front loading. Take a look at that. I highly recommend it. We are going to practice the heck out of this in our APSIs and also AP US History class. Okay, so you'll know how to do this. Finally, your body paragraph structure is just like the A structure from the short answer, okay, that you're going to have an assertion. That is going to be your topic sentence. That's going to include, hey, this is what this group's about. Then your citation is all the usage, the hipping, and evidence points. Okay, you just go through methodically the 4 documents or the 3 documents. Now realize, go through the 4 documents and HIP, then don't HIP the other 3. Okay, don't HIP like 7 documents. You're only going to HIP like 4 documents. Okay, then you introduce your second, third, and fourth documents if you're going to use the process of front loading the documents. That is how you have your ACE. Okay, because you're going to explain all this information to the reader, making sure they understand that you've used the document to answer the question, HIP the document to answer the question. Write in a piece of outside evidence. Yep, that's a 5. Okay, I'll take that all the time. Your last body paragraph or conclusion is the complexity point. If I haven't discussed these in my APSI or in my class, these are the 5 contextualization points, or excuse me, complexity points. I think the ones that I've highlighted in yellow are the best opportunity. I think explaining the opposite skill. So if you're talking about like similarities, which is sometimes a weird one to do for DBQs. Normally a DBQ is a causation essay or a change essay. Okay, it just happens to be that. So if you have one group of documents that are your causes and you have one document out there that's an effect, you can use it. Okay, I like to say that's your however. That's one way to approach it. I think that's the most simple way to do it. The next one is what used to be called synthesis, where you're going to explain the relevant and insightful connections within and across periods. In other words, you're going to say, this is how some things are similar that has happened before. Okay, I always like to compare the Boston Massacre with the Kent State Massacre, and that's a 200-year difference. So I'm going to talk about how they're similar and how does that show some idea of a connection. Okay, not that it's trying to answer the question, but a connection within the time period. I'm skipping over the ones that I don't have highlighted. The last one right there says qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse or alternate viewpoints. Okay, I discussed in my class Aunt Phyllis's Cabin that takes place in the 1950s, which is a reaction to Uncle Tom's Cabin. That particular book is going to be an alternate viewpoint to what's going on in the 1850s. You could also use women, African Americans, or American Indians as an alternate viewpoint as, hey, this is that lost voice. Okay, this could be done through a document. This could be done through a piece of outside evidence. Try to do your very best on next year's test on May the 5th in honor of Cinco de Mayo on 2023. I just threw this in here just so you have an idea if you want to use the themes and stuff like that. I'll explain a little bit more in my APSI. I might explain it in my AP US History class, but a lot of times I don't. All right, so DBQ planning. How do you plan your DBQ? Well, once you get a DBQ, and at this point in my class, I'm probably going to be handing out a DBQ. And we might even do it in the APSI this way, where I'll hand you a DBQ or we'll open a DBQ and we'll say, all right, let's see if we can do this. And this, on the day of the test, it should be done in about 20 minutes. Understand when you're taking the DBQ, 15 minutes into the DBQ, they're going to say, at this time, I recommend you begin writing your first essay response. That is a clue to you, ladies and gentlemen, that you got about 5 minutes left in the planning before you got to go plan your long essay. Because yes, you got to go plan your long essay. All right, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to read the question and underline the historical thinking skills, topics, and time periods. So you don't forget them, because you're going to use those words exactly to answer the question. Yes, it's going to sound boring, but you're going to do it because it's the first draft essay. Next, you're then going to read the 7 documents and write a 10 to 15 word sentence summary of what are the documents about. Okay, do that. This is going to help you in the front loading process. Then choose the 4 documents that are the easiest to hit. Those are going to be the ones that you're going to throw into the group and then be able to name the group. Okay, identify one piece of outside evidence that you can put into that first body paragraph. Now, if you can't fit it in the first body paragraph, it's okay, but try to fit it in that first body paragraph so you can get a 5 in 2 paragraphs. Finally, choose your analysis point. Okay, you can choose, remember, you can choose one document as the alternate point of view or opposite skill, but it must be developed well and used to answer the question in order to get the analysis point. Okay, you will write your 3rd or 4th body paragraph only when you are done writing a long essay. Okay, you got to jump over and write that long essay. How do I score? My DBQs, they somewhat look like this. So if you get a 7, you're going to get 100%, 6, 96, 90, 80, 74, 76, 60. So the lowest you're going to get if you attempt the DBQ is going to be a 60. In my AP class, I actually allow students to redo their DBQs for 100%. They can actually do that. Helps you out, okay? Helps the GPA. I hope this was beneficial. Please, if you are in my AP US History class, email me if you have questions. If you are a AP teacher and you are watching this either online or you're watching it at my APSI and you have questions, please reach out to me and ask questions either in class or via email. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day. Hold on. I thought I was done. And stop.